Welcome back, guys, to the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve, where last episode we learned all we could from Sholmes about his reasons behind faking Kazuma's death and the telegram he had sent and received. As with his misunderstandings cleared up just a few days ago, the names listed on the telegram turned out to be both assassins and their targets, with Gregson the target of assassin Kazuma in what seems to be an assassin exchange between nations. Armed with new info, we return to the Old Bailey on the moor, with Judge Jigoku called as the first witness. Having shown his link to all of this by presenting it and explaining the telegram, we now hear his first testimony. The assassin exchange. It's true that Kazuma Asugi was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour. However, in the end, something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times. If there'd been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so clearly I can't be involved. Interesting, we already see a hole. So you admit it then, as its communication suggests, there really was an assassin exchange arrangement between Britain and Japan. A political endeavor at the highest levels, not something I can discuss here. To use such a worthy practice as foreign study to coerce somebody to commit murder. It's the most appalling thing I've ever heard. Appalling? Well, it's easy to judge. Pardon? Asugi had a reason for taking his sword to that British inspector, you know. What? Which is why he accepted the mission in the first place. Isn't that right, Counsel? Kazuma-sama? Judge Jigoku, if you are the mastermind behind this operation in Japan, then tell the court the identity of your counterpart in Britain. I'm not obliged to divulge that information. As I said yesterday, I've killed nobody. I freely admit that I accepted the mission, but on the night the plan was to be executed, I backed out. In short, this assassin exchange that the defense has identified is unrelated to the events of this case. The crucial point is this. Your police inspector can't have perished aboard that steamship in Dunkirk. Because if he'd been shot in the cabin, it's inconceivable that a member of the crew wouldn't have heard it. That's right. Gregson was killed after returning to London, in the room on Fresno Street. And the perpetrator of the crime was the Reaper, Balok van Zieks. The prosecution's accusation remains unchanged. To think that a seemingly innocent foreign exchange program was a facade for such Machiavellian dealings. Clearly it's a plot only a government minister and high-ranking judge such as the witness could hope to execute. Well, I seem to recall that it was someone on the British side who controlled everything. Be that as it may, it is not the place of this court to pursue this villainous assassin exchange plot. We are concerned only with the tangible events pertaining to the murder of Inspector Gregson. Is the defense clear on that point, counsel? I don't think so. Yes, my lord. I'll keep that in mind as I cross-examine the witness. Hey, we may get points for staying on point. But now, the assassin exchange. Our turn. It's true that Kazuma Asugi was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now. Hold it! A year ago? When Kazuma was still in Japan, then? Correct. It was at the examination center for applicants for the study tour that I approached him. I'll never forget it. I remember exactly what you said. You just came out and asked me forthright if I considered traveling to Britain on an assassination mission. Surely not! I thought it was a joke at first, of course, but then it was made clear to me that if I didn't accept, I wouldn't be considered for the study tour. So you agreed to it, just for that? I mean, I know how much you wanted to study in England, but assassination! The Empire of Japan had accepted a proposal from the British Empire at the time, an agreement to send a student from each country to the others to deepen cultural understanding and friendship. But behind the scenes, the chosen students would be given assassination missions. I had no choice but to accept the proposal that originated from my British counterpart. Why? Why didn't you expose the plot there and then? Britain acknowledges no part in these alleged misbegotten dealings. I advise you not to make spurious allegations, Foreign Minister Jigoku. As a witness, I am bound to tell the truth, my lord. Anyway, I picked Asugi and explained the details of the plan to him. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour.
Hold it!
Why? Why Kazuma? Why did you pick him as the assassin? He was the most capable of all the applicants, and in addition, I knew his desire to travel to Britain was very strong. In fact, it was almost more than a desire. It was his whole purpose in life. Yes, as his best friend, I can certainly attest to that. The way he threw himself into his studies, the way he pursued becoming qualified as a lawyer. It was all ultimately for that one single goal of being accepted on a study tour to Britain. And of course, we know the reason behind that. He was determined to find out for himself the truth about his father, Genshin Asuki. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to get here. Be that agreeing to assume the role of an assassin, or betraying people's trust. Well, you certainly did a fine job of betraying mine, Asugi. But why was Inspector Gregson the target? I have no idea. Those were the orders from Britain. I was in no position to question them. You have no idea? Really? I find that hard to believe. Oh, do you? Judge Jigoku was once a visiting student here in Britain himself, of course. Perhaps he has some connection with Inspector Gregson from that time. And events really ought to catch up. With what? With the fact that the assassin exchange has absolutely nothing to do with the case under scrutiny here. Yes, I've already admitted to recruiting Asugi. However, in the end, something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. We already know what this is, really. I presume you're referring to the incident that occurred during Kazuma's passage to Britain in January. The awful tragedy that took place on the steamship. Word arrived at the ministry some 2 weeks after the ship's departure from our shores. The visiting student had been killed, but his body had somehow gone missing in Hong Kong. The news was wired to me from a detective I'd placed on the ship to accompany the assassin. Obviously, Kazuma didn't actually die at all, but he did lose his memory, including all details about his special mission. Did you not consider dispatching another assassin at that point? That wasn't possible, simply because that black-clad young student over there had already put himself forward as Asugi's replacement, and there was no way to stop him from reaching Britain. Ah! My hands were completely tied. So Mr. Sholmes' strategy worked perfectly. He predicted everything that would happen. Months later, my memory returned, but I'd never intended to go through with the assassination mission anyway. So you were playing me right from the outset, were you? Is that it? I'd sooner be guilty of that crime than of taking someone else's life. I was prepared to do whatever I had to in order to get myself here to Britain. This line of questioning has gone on long enough. All the court should be concerned about in the testimony given by this witness are details relating to his relationship with Inspector Gregson and the victim's murderer. In that case, as I've already made perfectly clear, I had no connection to the man or his death, and you have some means of substantiating this plea. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on out duty outside my cabin at all times. Now, this is the statement that instantly stood out, because it's about movements, people being there, here, there, when. And we know some stuff happened. Following departure from the port of Dunkirk, all crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. in order to review evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes. Crew to resume duties as soon as the drill is over. Essentially, straight away, we can see 100% that there was a time.
Objection!
Yes, as the court has heard, there was a crewman posted outside Judge Jigoku's cabin. However, we could be sure that, contrary to the witness's claim, The guard wasn't there at all times. What? I have here a notice of a particular event that was scheduled to take place aboard the steamship on the 31st. What? Where did you get that? It's evidence gathered by Mr. Herlock Sholmes. You were acquainted yesterday, if you remember. Herlock Sholmes again. According to this itinerary, after leaving the port of Dunkirk at exactly 10 p.m. and for a period of 20 minutes, all crewmen of the SS Grouse were to gather on deck for an evacuation drill. All crewmen were away from their posts. And during that 20-minute interval, of course, any gunshots emanating from your cabin would have been heard by no one. In summary, Judge Jigoku, you had ample opportunity to commit the crime. Start off simple. The stuff we just received, in a sense. A 20-minute window of opportunity. That's an excellent find, Ryunosuke. But it amounts to nothing. Why? Because the witness clearly stated in his testimony that no incident occurred in his cabin. Unless you have some decisive evidence that can show his testimony to be false. Your accusation is nothing more than conjecture. Very true. Well, counsel. Inspector Gregson was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin that night, I'm certain of it. Because the defense has the evidence to prove it. You will present the evidence for the defense at once, counsel. What proof do you have that the victim's life was taken in Jigoku's cabin on the 31st of October? Well, it's again things in the cabin. There are not a whole lot of them. So is it the telegram? Is it the evacuation drill itinerary? A small machine part that Mr. Sholmes found in Judge Jigoku's cabin on the SS Grouse, which is the top to Gregson's watch. I don't know if I have to somehow link them, though. That is a case that we don't understand just yet. But we're placing him at the scene. What do you think, Miss Susato? I feel sure I know exactly what will fit here. Really? I was just thinking precisely the same thing. We're about to see that the little round component is actually part of Inspector Gregson's broken pocket watch. Really? I was just thinking precisely that too. A perfect fit. I knew it. All right, perhaps you knew it. I'll make a note of this new information at once. And so we have it updated. It's now clear that it's the missing crown of Inspector Gregson's pocket watch. We place him at the scene, and the damage was done.
Take that!
Judge Jigoku, this was found in your cabin yesterday. What is that? The crown of a pocket watch? A pocket watch? And if you will observe, the victim's pocket watch, which we know he treasured, is missing precisely that part. It can't be. Moreover, this crown is a perfect fit on the spindle protruding from the victim's watch. Now, the fact that this was retrieved from Judge Jigoku's cabin tells us that the victim's watch almost certainly broke there. In other words, the victim was killed on the 31st during the 20-minute evacuation drill in the cabin occupied by you, Judge Jigoku. Well, you're razor sharp, aren't you, you young murderer?
Objection!
Expertly maneuvered, Ryunosuke. And your argument sounds entirely plausible at first. But rather like this pocket watch, it's full of cracks. What? And I believe Judge Jigoku feels the same way. I was wrong to acquit you earlier in the year. Sorry? If I'd known that it would result in anyone having to listen to this drivel, I would have declared you guilty just to spare the world your ridiculous bombast. I think it's clear that the witness will have to give further testimony. When you hear what actually happened in my cabin that night, you'll notice the pitfall into which you stumbled. Prior to your renewed testimony, I would like to clarify one point. The fact that this part of the victim's watch was discovered in your cabin means that you acknowledge he was there, I presume. Yes, I do. Very well then. You may proceed to give your formal testimony about what exactly happened in your cabin aboard the ship on the evening of the 31st October. Of course. As a man of the law, I have no intention of obstructing justice. Apart from fleeing the country and all that. I mean, you'll evade it. Events in the cabin. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. I soon took care of him with an ippon au fro, though. He couldn't wait to run away after that. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It has nothing to do with his murder. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London. Ippon Seo. A common jujutsu martial arts technique in my country. I was careful not to use too much force, but the man obviously landed too heavily for his watch to take. So, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I imagine you can see the flaw in your logic now, can't you? What? The fact that the pocket watch was broken in the witness's cabin in no way proves that the victim's murder took place there. Ah! I have no doubt the inspector intended to kill me, but he didn't manage to pull the trigger. Yes, because he was merely the tactician, not the Reaper's hand of death. Well, the testimony appears to make perfect sense as far as I can tell. Let me express my deep gratitude for your understanding, my lord. But if this testimony holds, Judge Jigoku will be deemed to have had no involvement in the case. Well, counsel, I really see no reason for wasting precious court time here on a cross-examination. Sorry, my lord. The defense has a right to cross-examine, and I don't intend to squander that. You're an embarrassment to your countrymen, not knowing when you're beaten. In that case, proceed, Mr. Naruhodo. Not sure what we're going for here. The last statement is a full stop point. Definitely killed in London. But we know, like, the fridge there, and there weren't many other places it could happen. So how are we getting him on that? I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room.
Hold it!
Because the so-called guard posted your cabin door had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector, which was the truth, of course. He wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. But the man accompanying him would have had 2 swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might have set off alarm bells in the guard's head. The point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned, and I immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly. All I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back at my cabin. And you entered without any inkling of suspicion. That's right. None whatsoever. Oh, not really much there, was there? When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. Why would he be, like, waving a gun? We know a gunshot happened there, though. Obviously, you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time, I didn't know the man's name. And there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean that the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose? That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. But I've never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. These aren't giving much. I soon took care of him with an Ippon seal throw, though. He couldn't wait to run away after that. I don't know if Gregson would, even though the man had a gun. That was a very brave move, wasn't it? My Ippon sail throw is far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector held himself with the stocky fellow and just managed to slip past him to make his escape. That easy. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of using a quick Ippon sail throw. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It has nothing to do with his murder.
Hold it!
The crown snapped off and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off or his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long. A bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken pocket watch doesn't prove that a murder took place. Absolutely not. All the watch proves is the power of my jujutsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin. Because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. What are you talking about? Huh? That's what the star of your lowbrow detective stories told you, is it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. Also, the crime scene's moved away, and it doesn't seem like we have evidence about it. Do we actually, have, absolutely zero evidence about that gunshot in the wall? It's not going good, is it? Inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain because his body was found in London.
Hold it!
There's no evidence that proves the victim ever returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. What? If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, how on earth could he have got back to Britain? When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. Well, then, obviously the culprit must have moved the body. Oh, exactly. Carrying a corpse off a ship in your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Well, yes, that's true, but all passenger luggage is inspected when it's unloaded from arriving vessels, and I would like to think the border police would query the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. If the murder had taken place aboard the ship, you would imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. That's killed that idea then, except to, manipulate a crime scene. But perhaps not. Miss Susato? We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crewmen posted to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. Yes, that's true. So transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? I thought I'd been perfectly clear, but it seems I'm going to have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony, with your consent, of course, my lord. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. There's no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain. Okay.
Hold it!
I still don't know what I'm going with here. There's an idea. Think about it, stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks at the border. The symposium guests were then driven straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry. And we met you as soon as you arrived at the hotel. So you did? Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? What? No! So we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless, of course, they've developed some clever device these days to instantly move things from A to B. Funny you should say that. Professor Hairbrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, of course. The fence has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say. So that's his story. Well, I suppose if you think about it, whenever you drop a teacup in the office and it breaks, we don't say Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we? Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one? And the fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on Fresno Street. If he really was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin, the body would have had to have been moved somehow, obviously. Transporting a dead body over a country border, that would be impossible for the majority of people. So there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then. That could be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo. Her mind reading never stops. So it's gotta be this, the altered one. We're challenging this thing. So we've got to find out something from the point where anything involving Jigoku we need to look at. It's not a pressing, it's a presenting. Of course, these are evolved, but I mean, he couldn't have murdered him and transported him to Britain while I was on the deck at Thingy. As was before it arrived at England. So that's a problem. Not much involving Jigoku, is there? There's this. So that's why that photo was taken all that time ago. My goodness, you wouldn't have noticed it when it was shown. But otherwise... Can we even see the stain or the slash? No. That's definitely that. Okay, so you just literally didn't get luggage checks. By the look of it. So we're just saying you came here with this. You didn't get luggage checks because you were special.
Objection!
There's no possible way you could have moved Inspector Gregson's body, you say? I would say the opposite is true. And what's that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do, the transporting of Inspector Gregson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Ryunosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jigoku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Which means he's exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We learned that when we first met you upon your arrival in London, though I don't remember that bit. Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took rather a lot of time. I must say, I'm very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you? Ah, I knew you were jealous. Ha 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 ha. Didn't remember that, it was just the only thing that's related. I presume you recall this, Judge Jigoku. It's a photograph we took in the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside. But Mr. Naruhodo, surely you're not suggesting... I'm afraid I am, yes. 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Gregson was just meters away from us, inside Judge Jigoku's trunk. Order! Order! Order in court! I'm skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk. It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. Verifying, that would be extremely simple, wouldn't it, Judge Jigoku? Also, I did, once. But inside his trunk? How horrifying! And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the apparent scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Dr. Gori, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She's acknowledged there are signs that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator. Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, Refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between. Yes, I'm sure they are. But one place I certainly found is on large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages. And the SS Grouse is no exception. Professor Mikotoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jigoku? However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer. And so we end another episode of the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve with things finally on the right track. Judge Jigoku's came, gave his testimonies, but they weren't quite flawless even though he works within the law. He is quite lawless with his attempt to escape the country after all. But now we have him here, and now we have him at the end of my finger point. So let's continue on this line next time. I'll see you guys around for more. Bye-bye.